So, Sister Jayanti, why do you think it is that human beings are instinctively so drawn to light? Both physical light, but also metaphorically, they're drawn to light. And what do you think this says about our intrinsic nature or our deeper nature?
Human beings are instinctively drawn to light because there's beauty in light. This morning, when I opened the curtains and I saw that there was a little bit of light more than the last few months, I was very, very happy. And I was just thinking about that this morning, that it's such a joy to see the light of the sun rather than the darkness of winter. And so I know that when there's winter and there's darkness, especially in some countries where it's extremely dark for the whole day practically, there's a lot of depression. So I think that light not only uplifts us and inspires us, but it's very beautiful. And so I think it's also a reminder that when we think about light, it's not just the physical light, but it's the light within. It's the light of purity, the light of love, the light of truth. And so light is something that we love instinctively.
And in what ways do you think that the soul itself can be understood as an expression of light? And how do you think this concept of the soul as light shines a light on our understanding of consciousness itself?
When I started Raj Yoga meditation, and I was being told about consciousness and the soul, it was described to me as a luminous, conscient, sentient being. And I could actually immediately experience it. And so I think that the actual form of the soul is a luminous form, light. And within that light, there is that consciousness and awareness of identity. I know who I am. I am this being of light. And when I not just believe it, but deeply understand it and realize it, then literally it's as if somebody's pressed a button and the light is shining. And people often have visions of light. When they see yogis, they see the light shining in the forehead, they see an aura of light around them. So I think that it's a reality that this is what the soul is, a luminous point.
And we're saying here that the soul itself is in the form of light, and that some people have a vision and see that spark of light. So it's not just a belief with no foundation. But to take it one step further and look at the idea that God itself, God, him or herself, is also in the form of light, how helpful do you think that understanding is?
When people have had visions of God, many have reported seeing light. And they know that it's not just the light from a bulb or the light from the sun, but they feel the vibrations of the qualities of the divine, the source. They can feel the source of light and love. And so they recognize that this is that being who is the divine, the supreme, the source. And just as souls are a conscient point of light, in the same way, the Supreme Soul, the form is the same, just an infinitesimal spark of light. But within that light is the ocean of love, the ocean of truth, the ocean of beauty and goodness. And so we can actually experience this when I'm in the awareness of the soul, I, the being of light, and I think of God, the Supreme, as that being of light, and I feel that connection. There are two things that happen. I draw peace from the divine within myself, a peace that surpasseth understanding, something that is not just intellectual understanding, but also that peace is able to awaken my own natural, original state of peace and truth and love. And so I think it's such a beautiful idea because all traditions, through all ages, have remembered light as something sacred, whether it's the burning of a candle, whether it's the burning in India of a diya, a homemade earthenware lamp. So light has been commemorated through all the different traditions of the world. So I think there's something universal here.
Some people may struggle with the idea that something as vast as the Supreme Being, the Divine, can be contained in such a tiny point. Because we're raised with these stories from the scriptures of God being brighter than 1,000 suns, and the power of God is so overwhelming you could never look at it directly. And so to think of it as being a tiny little pinpoint of light is almost counterintuitive for some people, and also the human soul to be such a tiny point of light. How do we get such vastness into such a tiny point?
It sounds a paradox, but yet in fact it's a reality that the deeper you go into even matter and you're able to explore the power contained within just an atom, something that's invisible to the naked eye. Well, we're talking about the physical dimension, but when you go into the non-physical, the non-material dimension, and you have this awareness of the inner being that I am as that being of light, and you know that that whole life source, the living energy that I am, is contained within this point of light. In that awareness, then you can understand how the divine, the source, is also infinitesimal. And yes, the qualities of the divine are infinite. I was walking into a room the other day, and even from the corridor, I could smell the scent of lilies. And when I walked into the room, I saw these beautiful lilies in a vase. But the scent had gone beyond the boundaries of that room, and I could smell it even in the corridor itself. And so you can see how here's a flower, very specific in one location, but this fragrance pervades the whole room and even beyond the walls of that room. And so even on a physical level, we know that impact and size are not necessarily connected. And so the infinitesimal source, but yet the qualities that emanate from that source are vast, are infinite. And wherever I am in the world, I can connect with the divine and have that experience of each one of those qualities reaching me.
We've talked about the sunlight when we open the curtains in the morning, and we've talked about the Supreme being in the form of light and human souls being in the form of light. But there's one thing beyond both of those, and that is that we originally come from a land of light, a home of light. And perhaps this is why light is such an important quality for us. And that between those two dimensions, there is also a realm of light beyond our physical plane in which we can exist as beings of light. Could you say something about these distinct geographical locations, if you like?
We can only reach the limits of the physical world through our physical senses. But if I go beyond my physical senses into the inner being that I am, the soul, my mind is not contained or restricted by physical boundaries. It can cross time, it can cross the barriers of distance, but it can also cross the barrier between the physical dimension and move into the subtle dimension, and beyond that, the supreme dimension. So 3 different dimensions. The physical, where there's physical bodies and matter and the drama of life goes on. Then the subtle dimension, where I can go with the power of my thoughts and my feelings and my consciousness, and there I can experience the subtle angelic beings, and I can even experience my own subtle angelic form, which is similar to this one, but not of bones and flesh. And so that's maybe something that at some point people might want to experiment with. But beyond that, there's another dimension. The dimension of what in India is described as the Brahma Tattva, the element of light, not your earth, air, water, fire, space, but beyond that, the sixth element, the element of light. And it's a space which has no boundaries, no walls. And it's not really above or below, but it's beyond. And so I can only go there in the awareness of the soul. Any consciousness of this, and gravity pulls me down. But in the awareness of the soul, detached from the consciousness of this, I can travel to that dimension and experience this infinite beauty of light, of purity, of peace. A total state of stillness. And this is the home. And to my surprise, what I've discovered through sharing these ideas with many people of many backgrounds all over the world, there are some people who, in a conscious way, have rejected the notion of the divine until they start meditating and they're learning to go beyond the limits of this. Then they begin to experience the divine. But even quite apart from that, even before they actually begin to practice, when I've spoken to them about this dimension of light, of silence and purity, some of them will say, I've had an experience of that. Somewhere within the recording of the soul, there is this memory of being in a sweet home, a very sweet feeling of being back home and that world of light. And so it's interesting that within the memory track that's recording everything within the soul, that experience of being in a home is actually triggered when somebody starts thinking about the dimension beyond sound, beyond movement, to a dimension where there's total stillness.
And what role do you feel this light that you're talking about is playing in healing the earth and healing the world and healing human souls at this time? How important is light for that healing journey?
In the connection of soul with the source, the process of healing of the soul begins through the love and the process of purification through the power of truth and purity. And the way I see this is I see my patterns of behavior changing. Maybe I was a little impatient before. There was a tendency for anger if things were not going the way I wanted. There was a tendency to get attached and be possessive. So one begins to see how the light has such power through the truth and purity that it's able to transform human patterns of behavior and also bring about healing within the self in terms of the soul and the trauma we've been through. But also, connected with the divine, the source, we're able to be instruments to be able to share that healing light of love across the whole of the human family so that everyone is able to experience something reaching them which was not of their origin. They were maybe just lost in their self-pity or they were lost in their own trauma, whatever it is. And suddenly it felt as if there was a light that touched them. And another process began, a different way of thinking, a different consciousness and attitude. Now, they weren't making any effort for that, but that light reached them somehow. And maybe when we have what we call our meditation for healing others, sending our best wishes and good wishes to all, we can actually think of anybody we know who is going through a difficult time, physical, emotional, spiritual, and collectively 2, 5, 20, 100, however many. The number doesn't matter. But when there's this collective connection and we're holding that person just for a moment between the divine and me, and we are sending our good wishes to that individual, maybe that's what's reaching them. They don't know that there's 100+ people praying for them or sending them good thoughts and meditation, but they feel it, and they sometimes are able to tell others, and we get feedback, well, something happened and things changed for me. But also, this healing light of love has to reach the animal kingdom so that they are healed from our acts of violence. We have inflicted huge violence on the animal kingdom, but also nature itself, all the biological life that exists. We can share our thoughts of purity and peace and God's light and love with nature, giving a tiny fraction back to how much nature has done for us. Nature's abundance and nature's beauty, even now after multi-thousands of years, is so visible. And what have we done? We've trampled on nature, we've violated nature, we've broken all the rules of the natural laws of the universe. There has been huge harm, violence, hinsa done against nature. But nature continues to give us. Yes, we see the elements erupting with force in some places, but comparatively speaking, most of the Earth's population is still being sustained by nature. And yes, you're beginning to see the comeback of all our violence. And so I don't need to explain the detail, but you know all the natural disasters that are happening everywhere. So it's time for us to connect with the One so that those healing thoughts and vibrations can impact nature itself also and restore harmony once again.
It's lovely to think that I can be a part of this healing process for nature. And I can imagine people listening to how you've spoken about the light and the qualities of light and how transformative that can be. How do you advise anyone who wants to connect more to this light and carry more of this light in their own lives as part of their day-to-day reality? What can I do to bring more light into my life?
Knowledge has been described as light. God has been described as a sun who radiates that knowledge and gives us that light. And so I would recommend to anybody who's interested in this subject to connect with the Brahma Kumaris Center or our UN office, and they'll be able to put you on track. But the point is that, and all our services are totally free of cost, but the point is that I need to understand, firstly, the identity of the inner being. I can feel the light that I am, but what are the ingredients that make up this light? And I discover ideas about thoughts and feelings and consciousness and patterns of behavior and much more. So firstly, I need to understand that. Then I can start experimenting with this awareness of I, the light shining in the forehead. Secondly, I need to understand the source. Who is this being? What is this being? And what role does this being have in terms of humanity and where humanity is at? Is there a role that God actually plays? I believe so. Because where human beings haven't been able to succeed, surely the parent, the creator, is concerned with love and compassion to help the children, to help the creation. And so I believe this is that time when there's intervention within human activity by the divine, so that we're able then to create a connection with the divine and draw that light within ourselves. when the day begins and there's sunshine, the energy that you have is tremendous, and you can do things that you were a little bit tired during the night, you were a little bit sleepy, very sleepy maybe, but once the day begins, you're ready for action. Same thing. Souls have become very tired, exhausted. This is why we see the increase to the pandemic proportions of mental illness. But when we have that connection with the source, that light, we're able to feel that energy reviving us, waking us up, and we're able to do things that normally we'd say, oh, that's very difficult or that's impossible. But this energy allows us to achieve loving cooperation, collaboration between human beings, between the nation states, so that we can tackle all the critical issues of our time. Because it's this coming together that's going to make a difference. And so I believe that as we feel that connection and experience the power of that within ourselves, we can set the world right again.
Sister Jayanti, thank you so much.
Thank you. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Recording stopped.